Welcome to Crown TV. Immerse yourself with a captivating audio from our stories. We provide an alternative way to read books in audio. We upload many audiobooks as possible, from bestsellers to timeless classic. Subscribe and stay tuned for new upload.
Episode 76. Clean It Up. Melissa grabbed the corner of Debbie's lyric sheet. Startled, Debbie looked up and saw that Melissa and the other girls were now standing next to her. She was trying to practice, and she needed that sheet. So why was Melissa trying to take it? She froze for a moment before Melissa yelled, "Let go!" Debbie was so frightened that she trembled as she let go of the lyric sheet. She looked at Melissa with a hurt expression. Why was she being so mean to her? Her heart sank. Janice was very nice to Debbie, but Melissa and her friends didn't seem to like her. "Don't be so serious," Melissa said jokingly, as she dropped into a swivel chair. Katie and Olivia sat beside her, while Rita remained standing, looking at Debbie with a faint smile. "Hey, new girl, since you've joined our band, you have to follow our rules," Melissa sneered. "From now on, we're your superiors. I'm the boss. Olivia Taylor is second, Katie Jackson's third, and Rita Lopez over there is fourth. You're last. You should call me Miss Kennedy." "Yes, Miss Kennedy," Debbie said. Although she knew they were teasing her, she still did as they asked. She looked at Rita, who was fiddling with her guitar, and said, "Hello, Miss Lopez." "Just call me Rita. There is no such rule," Rita said plainly. Melissa glanced at Rita. She laughed, and the other girls joined in. She was quite proud of her joke, but Debbie was being very quiet, having been firmly put in her place. Debbie ignored their mockery. Right now, all she wanted to do was improve her singing, and she just wanted to be left alone to practice. She turned away. "Hey, new girl, did we say you could go?" Melissa asked with dissatisfaction. A scowl marred her beautiful face. "What do you want?" Debbie asked, also unhappily. She had called them by their surnames as they had wanted, but they were always calling her New Girl. They had no respect for her at all. "Haven't you seen the mess in this room?" Melissa asked. "Every new member needs to take a turn cleaning up, so you can do it now. Remember to clean everything on the table and to wash the floor properly." Rita stopped strumming her guitar and sighed. When she saw that Debbie had accepted Melissa's order and started cleaning, she shook her head and resumed playing. Debbie cleared the table, and then she swept the floor with a broom before wiping it with a mop. She was very good at these things. Before she had come to college, she had often helped her mother with tasks like these. She had just finished cleaning the floor when Olivia and Katie walked over it on their way to the door, leaving 2 rows of black footprints. Debbie glanced at the 2 of them as they wandered off, talking and laughing. She didn't say anything, but simply wiped away their footprints. When she had finally finished, she was about to put away the mop when Katie and Olivia came back with a few bags of snacks. "Please wait a few minutes and the floor will be dry," she said to them with a smile. "I'm in a hurry," Katie said casually as she followed Olivia into the practice room, again leaving 2 rows of black footprints behind them. Debbie glared at their backs, but in the end, she still took the mop and wiped away their footprints. "Stay there," she told them. "The floor will be dry in about 5 minutes. If you walk on it again, I won't clean it." She knew that these 3 girls didn't like her. Before Debbie finished speaking, Melissa looked at her with a smile. The bag she was holding slowly fell from her hands, and the potato chips dropped to the floor, causing a mess. "Oops, I'm sorry," Melissa said with a smile. "Let's get this place cleaned up a bit more." No matter how good-natured Debbie was, she couldn't help but glare angrily at Melissa. She didn't say anything as she carried her mop and walked out the door. "Stop!" Melissa cried out, her voice echoing in the empty practice room. Debbie did not stop. "Where do you think you're going?" Melissa yelled. The sound of hurried footsteps came from behind Debbie, who turned around and raised her hands to defend herself. Melissa grabbed Debbie's neck and pushed her against the wall. "Who do you think you're dealing with? You're a country bumpkin from a small town. How dare you disrespect me?" You're nothing compared to us, Katie said with a sneer. Show some respect. Your mother wants to puke when she sees you acting so pitiful. Do you really think you can be a lead singer? Olivia said sarcastically. Debbie only looked at them in fear. Look at this little bitch, Melissa said, laughing. She's so scared of us that she's shaking. And here she thought she was so awesome. She fiercely pushed Debbie away, causing her to stagger. Go, clean up the floor. Angry and frightened, Debbie picked up a broom and prepared to clean. Look, Melissa, Olivia said. She'll do whatever she's told, just like a dog. She'll be easy to control in the future. That's right, who cares if she sings well? Katie joined in. But we won't be able to beat her if she becomes the lead singer. Listening to her friend's flattery, Melissa felt proud of herself. She crossed her arms and sneered at Debbie. Didn't this little bitch say that she and her mother are the only two people in her family? She asked. With her mother being a poor woman from the country, it would be a miracle for Debbie to go to university. Her mother must have done something shady to get the money. If she could have some fun and also earn some extra money... Shut up! Debbie yelled as she turned around to glare fiercely at Melissa. Hey, bitch, did you dare to yell at me? Melissa spoke slowly and deliberately as she angrily walked toward Debbie. So, your mom is your weak spot, right? Your mother is a prostitute who sleeps with men all day long. She kicked at Debbie's lower abdomen. Don't insult my mother, Debbie screamed angrily. She grabbed Melissa's leg and flung her away so hard that Melissa's head bounced off the floor when she fell. Debbie and her mother had always been mutually dependent on each other, and she knew how many hardships her mother had suffered to provide for her. When Olivia and Katie saw Melissa hit the floor, they rushed forward and pushed Debbie away. You little bitch! You actually dared to hit me, Melissa said, glaring at her. You'll pay for that. She rubbed at her head as Katie and Olivia helped her up. Hit her, she ordered. The girls rushed at Debbie to beat her up. Debbie was too weak to fight back. She could only kneel on the ground, hugging her head to protect it. Blows rained down on her shoulders. Katie kicked her to the floor, and the three of them jumped on her, kicking her head, back, and stomach. Enough! Rita pushed Melissa and the other girls, who were punching and kicking Debbie as hard as they could. Mind your own business, Melissa said, glaring at Rita. You guys are being too loud. I need some peace and quiet, Rita said, looking at Melissa. Then get lost, Melissa said, exasperated. If it's too noisy here, then go somewhere else. Do you want me to call Janice? Rita took out her phone and shook it at her. You... Melissa stared angrily at Rita. If Janice found out about this, then they would be in trouble. She glanced at Debbie, then said, If you dare to complain to Janice, you'll be sorry. Let's go, Melissa glared at Rita, and then left with Olivia and Katie. Rita let out a sigh of relief as she watched the girls walk away. She turned around and looked at Debbie, who was curled up on the floor, trembling, with her arms wrapped around her head. She's so pitiful, she thought, feeling sorry for her. Get up, she said, squatting down to help her. Debbie's face had a few bruises, and her hair was a mess. Her clothes were dirty and covered in black footprints. Thank you, Debbie said softly with tears in her eyes. Rita was moved by her timid appearance. No need to thank me, Rita said, looking away. I just don't like those guys. Well, thank you anyway, Debbie answered, a little disappointed by Rita's words. If you don't want to be bullied again, then you need to find a boyfriend to protect you, Rita said. Then she walked toward the door. Debbie! Alex called as he rushed in, brushing past Rita. When he saw Debbie, he was shocked and felt sorry for her. Rita's expression became a bit dejected. Judging by Alex's appearance and clothes, he wouldn't be able to protect Debbie at all. Alex, Debbie said. When she saw him, she couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears started dripping down her cheeks, and she hugged him tightly. Who hit you? Alex asked, looking at her bruised face. He was anxious to know the identity of the culprit so that he could avenge her. He turned around and looked at Rita with an unfriendly expression. Is that her? I'll make her pay for this. No, it's not her, Debbie said. The person who hit me is gone. She pulled him back, stopping him from going after Rita. Rita smiled wryly and shook her head. Debbie's life was already difficult enough, and the universe had given her a silly boyfriend like this. Disappointed, she walked out of the room. Episode 77, Rushing to the Hospital. As soon as Rita left, Debbie threw herself at Alex and hugged him tightly, sobbing. When Melissa and the other girls had been beating her, Debbie had felt completely alone. Now that she was in Alex's arms, she felt warm and safe. "Why did they say such awful things about my mother?" she asked. "I know how hard my mom's life is. She works hard every day. And whenever I was sick, she would get up really early and go out to get medicine for me. She never complains. I don't care if they make fun of me or hit me, but why do they have to insult my mother?" When she remembered the look on Melissa's face when she had insulted Debbie's mother, Debbie couldn't control her emotions. Her voice broke, and she stomped on the ground, her whole body shaking. "It's okay, Debbie," Alex said. Seeing her like this, he grew even more worried. He hated the people who had hurt her so badly. He gently patted her back to calm her down as quickly as possible. "Don't worry," he assured her. "If anyone hurts you, I'll make sure they pay for it. I will always be by your side to protect you. How are you feeling now? Any better?" As he comforted her, she finally calmed down. "Who beat you?" Alex asked, gently wiping away her tears. "Tell me and I'll deal with it." His eyes held a trace of viciousness. "It was 3 of my bandmates," Debbie answered, speaking softly. She was no longer as upset as before. "Just forget about it. If they try this again, then you can do something." Debbie didn't want to cause trouble with Melissa and the other girls. After all, they were in a band together, and they would have to get along. "But Debbie," Alex wanted to give those girls a good beating. "No, listen to me," she said gently, looking at him. "I'll talk to them, and if they attack me again, then I'll let you beat them up for me." He frowned. Although he didn't want to let this go, he had to listen to her. "Will you come with me to the Azalea guest house to see my mom?" she asked. More than anything, she just wanted to see her mother. Even just sitting quietly beside her would make Debbie feel better. "Okay." Alex was deeply moved. He lightly touched her face and smiled. "Before you go and see your mom, maybe you should wash your face." Debbie took a quick shower, and then they left to visit her mother. Alex held her hand as they walked. It was 9 p.m. and the streets were brightly lit, with many people walking on both sides of the road, enjoying the cool air as they strolled under the trees. As Alex and Debbie walked down the steps of the building, Alex's cell phone rang. It was Sam Woodsworth. Alex frowned slightly, thinking that he must have been invited to a party again. "Mr. Ambrose," Sam's panicked voice came through the phone. "There seems to be a serious problem with Mrs. Stonehill. She's been taken to the New York City General Hospital. Do you want to come and see her?" On hearing this, Alex was stunned. "Something happened to Carla?" he asked. "What's going on?" He put the phone on speaker so that Debbie could hear properly. "What happened to my mother?" Debbie asked anxiously, her chest growing tight with worry. "I sent someone to accompany Mrs. Stonehill on a tour of New York City," Sam told them. "Everything was fine until an hour ago when they were out eating. Mrs. Stonehill fainted after complaining about being in pain, and she was taken to the hospital emergency room. She's now in intensive care." By the time Sam had finished speaking, Debbie's legs were about to collapse under her. "Okay, tell the doctor to look after Carla," Alex said. "If anything happens to her, they won't work in that hospital again." He ended the call. "Alex, take me to the hospital," Debbie said, panicking as she clutched his arm. "Please, hurry, I need to go to the hospital." She was very anxious and scared, and couldn't think about anything else. She just needed to go to the hospital to see her mother. She had an ominous foreboding that was growing more and more intense. Her entire body trembled. "Don't be afraid," Alex whispered into her ear. "Trust me, your mom will be fine." He kept his arm around her, and they walked to the side of the road. It wasn't easy to get a taxi. Alex felt Debbie trembling in his arms, and he couldn't let her suffer any longer. Leaving her for a moment, he walked into the middle of the road and forced a black Audi to stop. "Do you have a death wish?" the driver yelled. Alex threw a wad of money at the driver's face through the open window before jumping back to the sidewalk. On seeing the money, the owner of the car smiled, his eyes gleaming. There were at least $1,000 there. "Don't just stay there," Alex yelled. "Pull over here." The driver realized that the young man who had just thrown money at him was calling him, and he hurriedly drove over. Alex opened the back door of the car and got inside with Debbie. He told the driver to take them to the general hospital as quickly as possible. He sat with his arms around Debbie as he comforted her. "Don't worry," he murmured. "Your mom will be fine, trust me." The car stopped abruptly. "Move it!" Alex shouted angrily at the driver. He just wanted to get Debbie to her mother quickly. "Young man, it's not that I don't want to move, it's that I can't," the driver said, his tone bitter. "The road is blocked." Alex looked and saw more than 10 young people in front of the car. He had no idea what they were doing. He opened the car window, stuck out his head, and shouted at them, "Hey, get out of the way!" The crowd were all gathered around a rich young man called Henry, who had been confessing his love to a girl, and now he was being humiliated by Alex shouting at him. "Get lost!" Henry shouted. "If you interrupt me again, I'll kill you." "Go another way," someone yelled. "We won't let you interfere." "Go away," came another shout. "Don't hold up Henry's declaration of love." A tall young man walked aggressively toward Alex, hurling curse words. "Hey, why haven't you turned back yet? Are you looking for a beating?" The driver was frightened and was about to turn around. "Don't move," Alex shouted at him. "There's another route," the driver said fearfully. "We can get close and then you can walk the rest of the way from there. That guy's almost reached us, and if we don't leave now, we'll get beaten up." "I told you not to move," Alex said as he opened the car door. The tall young man approached and raised his fist, ready to strike. Alex didn't wait for the man's fist to make contact. He grabbed the young man's hair and dragged his head down hard. At the same time, he pulled up his right knee and hit the man in the face, knocking him unconscious. He punched the man again and dropped him on the ground. The young man had been defeated because he had underestimated Alex's strength. The driver had planned to abandon Alex and run away, but then Alex had beaten the young man within seconds. The driver was completely dumbfounded. Even louder curses began to come from the crowd, and the driver saw the 10 young men rushing toward Alex. Henry told the others to teach Alex a lesson while he stayed behind to talk to the girl. The driver panicked, believing that he was about to be beaten up. His first thought was to escape. Just as he was about to turn the car around, Alex cursed and angrily walked to the driver's side. He yanked open the car door and shouted, "Get out!" "Hey, what are you doing?" the driver asked, shocked. Alex pulled him from the car and got into the driver's seat. "Get in," he yelled, slamming the door closed. The owner of the car looked at the 10 young men who were running toward them, and then he scampered around to the passenger side and got in. Through the rear-view mirror, Alex glanced at Debbie, who looked sad. Then he looked at the young men rushing toward him. "Fine then," he thought. "Since you're so determined to block my way, don't blame me for being rude." Alex stepped on the accelerator and the car shot forward. "Hey, what are you doing?" the car owner asked worriedly. "If you crash into someone, you'll kill them." "Shut up," Alex roared. When the young men saw the car speeding toward them, they were shocked. "Don't be afraid," one of the men yelled. "He won't dare to hit us. Come and stand in front of him." None of the men believed that Alex would dare to crash into them. After all, there were 10 of them. They continued moving toward Alex, but the car's speed kept increasing without any signs of slowing down. The tires screeched loudly as the car charged toward them like a ferocious beast made of steel. Only then did the men realize that Alex wasn't joking, and they quickly ran away. Alex knocked over a few of the young men, sending them falling to the ground, screaming in pain. Henry was still pestering the girl he wanted when Alex's car came toward him. The girl standing beside Henry was completely stunned. When she saw the car, she covered her ears, closed her eyes, and screamed. Frightened, Henry fled, but he couldn't avoid being hit by the car. He rolled a few times and landed next to the sidewalk. Only when she heard the car roar away did the girl dare to open her eyes. Watching its taillights disappear, she thought about what had happened. When Alex had walked over earlier, she had seen his face and hadn't been able to look away. She mumbled in confusion, "That man was so handsome." Episode 78. Trust me, she'll be fine. Alex was driving through the streets at 100 miles per hour. He overtook one car, then another, then yet another. Some of the other drivers on the road were scared, while some were confused by what was going on. Most of them pointed at his taillights and cursed at him. He didn't care about his life. Alex ignored the red light at an intersection, and a man riding an electric bike had to swerve to avoid him. The man was sent sprawling, and by the time he got up, Alex was already some distance away. They arrived at the General Hospital within 20 minutes. "How many red lights did you run?" the car owner asked, his expression pained. "I'm going to lose my license." During the mad dash to the hospital, the car owner's heart had been in his mouth, and he had regretted letting Alex drive his car. No amount of money was worth risking death. Alex didn't care about the car owner. He got out of the car and opened the back door to help Debbie out. "Don't worry, nothing will happen to you," Alex assured the man. He had been driving the man's car, so Alex wouldn't let him get into any trouble. With that, he helped Debbie into the hospital. When they arrived at the ICU, Sam was waiting outside the ward. "Mr. Ambrose, Miss Stonehill, you made it," Sam said. "What's going on?" Alex asked with a frown. Debbie had let go of him and dashed to the door of the ICU, worriedly looking in through the window. A few doctors in white coats surrounded Carla, who was lying in bed. From time to time, they checked the numbers on the machines, while a few nurses helped to make Carla comfortable. The CEO of the General Hospital walked over, and when he saw Debbie looking in, he called out, "Close the blinds." Sam had arranged for Carla to be seen immediately, and he had called in the most capable doctor to treat her. "The patient is this girl's mother," Sam said, frowning. Seeing Sam's expression, the CEO grew nervous. Sam thought highly of this girl. "I'm sorry," he hurriedly apologized to Debbie. "I didn't mean to offend you." Debbie barely heard a single word of what he was saying. The only thing she cared about was her mother. Alex still didn't know what was wrong with Carla. He walked up beside Debbie and put an arm around her shoulders as she looked into the ward. She didn't say a word, but he could feel her body trembling. More than an hour later, the doctors finished their treatment and walked out of the ICU. "Doctor, how is my mother?" Debbie asked anxiously, stepping in front of Dr. Henderson. The doctor glanced at Sam, who nodded. Only after getting Sam's agreement did the doctor begin to tell Debbie about Carla's illness. "Your mother's condition is very complicated," Dr. Henderson said. "We've managed to stabilize her for now, but we'll need to consult with some of our colleagues." Debbie was stunned. Her legs became weak, and she would have fallen to the ground if Alex hadn't been holding her up. "Don't be afraid," Alex comforted her. "The doctor said that your mom is stable. Trust me, she'll be fine." "I want to see her," Debbie said. She didn't want to listen anymore. She didn't feel at all reassured and just wanted to rush into the ICU. "Miss, please calm down," the doctor said, holding out a hand to stop her. "Your mother is very weak right now. She needs rest. Besides, she's not conscious at the moment, so even if you go in, she can't speak to you." "Listen to the doctor," Alex advised, frowning. "If you go in, it might make your mom's condition worse." Seeing Debbie like this, his heart ached. "The nurse is taking good care of her. Don't worry, your mom will be fine." His gentle persuasion worked, and Debbie stopped insisting on seeing Carla, but she refused to move away from the window. He looked at Sam and said, "Find all the best doctors in New York. If they can't help Debbie's mom, their careers are over." "I'll do it now," Sam said in fear, never having seen Alex in such a mood before. He left to make the arrangements. The CEO and the doctor were both shocked. This guy, who looked like an ordinary student, had shouted at Sam Woodsworth. And even more shocking was the fact that Sam obeyed him. Debbie stood by the window and watched quietly for over 3 hours. Sam told them that there was a doctor at another nearby hospital who was rushing over right now, and the hospital doctors were urgently discussing Carla's condition. "You should rest," Alex said, leading Debbie to a chair in the corridor. They sat down, and Debbie leaned forward with her elbows on her knees, resting her forehead in her hands. "It'll be fine, believe me," Alex reassured her as he patted her back, but he was starting to feel as uncertain as she did. "What's going on?" someone yelled from inside the room. A moment later, a nurse rushed out. Debbie jumped in fright. She ran to the door of the ICU and looked inside. The nurse seemed flustered and unsure of what to do, and Carla was already awake. "Mom!" Debbie was extremely anxious. She pushed at the door, wanting to rush in. The nurse hurried over and opened the door. Debbie was about to run in, but the nurse stopped her. "Miss, please calm down. Only doctors can come in here," the nurse said anxiously. "You have to stay out there. There's nothing you can do to help. Right now your mother's condition is very serious. We've already sent for a doctor, so please be patient." "Debbie, calm down," Alex said, holding her back. "You won't be able to do anything in there. You just have to wait for the doctor." "Let me go. I want to see my mother," Debbie said, trying her best to get away from him. She was completely out of control with worry. The same doctors from before ran over. Alex dragged the struggling Debbie away from the door to allow them entry. "I'm worried too," he told her, "but there's nothing we can do to help. I've already asked Sam to call all the best doctors in the city. Believe me, your mom will be fine." Although Debbie wanted to rush in to see her mother, she knew Alex was right, and she stopped fighting him. However, 10 minutes later, a flustered young doctor ran out and approached Sam. Trembling with fear, he said, "Mr. Woodsworth, the patient. Her condition is deteriorating, and there's not much we can do." Dr. Henderson said it's possible that, well, she may not make it. "What?" Sam asked. He glanced at Alex, who froze in shock, his eyes wide. Standing beside him, Debbie became even more agitated. "If anything happens to Mrs. Stonehill, then your career is over," Sam shouted at the doctor. "But Dr. Henderson said that the patient is already critical," the doctor whispered fearfully. Alex noticed the doctor's tone and realized what was happening. He stopped restraining Debbie and rushed to the door of the ICU with her. "What are you doing? You can't go in there," the young doctor objected. Sam slapped his face. "Open the door for Mr. Ambrose." "Yes, of course," the doctor said, hurrying to open the door. Alex, Debbie, and Sam all walked into the ICU. Debbie stood beside the bed, holding back tears as she looked at her mother. Carla's face was pale and haggard. She wore an oxygen mask and had several tubes sticking out of her body. Doctors were gathered around the bed. Debbie was stunned. She couldn't get in the way of her mother's treatment, but her heart felt as if it were breaking. "How is Mrs. Stonehill?" Sam asked Dr. Henderson. Seeing Sam's serious expression, the group of doctors grew nervous. "We had stabilized the patient's condition earlier, but now there's been a sudden change," Dr. Henderson reported. "Her heart and lungs are failing, and her liver, spleen, and kidneys are struggling too. There are also problems with her large intestine and respiratory tract." He had been surprised when he had seen Carla's condition. He had never witnessed anything like this before. "Just tell me if you can cure her." Sam lost his patience. Dr. Henderson's heart sank. The other doctors didn't even dare to breathe loudly. "I'm afraid, no, I can't," Dr. Henderson admitted. If you can't cure her, then what's the point of you being here? Sam reprimanded him angrily. His words scared Dr. Henderson so much that he staggered back. The rest of the doctors and nurses also inched further away. Mr. Woodsworth, forgive me, but the patient's condition is very unusual, Dr. Henderson explained. Within a short span of 3 to 4 hours, her condition has deteriorated to such an extent that not even the most authoritative expert in the world would be able to save her. I've never seen anything like it. He stared at Sam in trepidation, hoping Sam would understand. Carla, who was still in bed, slowly raised her hand. But she was too weak to lift it far. Debbie couldn't hold back any longer. She pushed the doctor aside and rushed to the bed. She glanced at the doctor and said, "My mom wants to take off her oxygen mask." She knew her mother well and knew what she wanted just by looking at her. Dr. Henderson gently removed Carla's oxygen mask. Carla, who looked pale and extremely weak, said softly to Sam, "Mr. Woodsworth, I don't blame the doctors for my illness. It's not their fault. But please send them out so I can have a private word with Debbie." "You can't," the doctor objected, knowing that Carla would die. Sam cast a questioning gaze at Alex. "All of you get out," Alex said, realizing that Carla could no longer be saved. They all headed toward the door. "Alex, please wait a moment," Carla said weakly. Alex stayed behind while Sam and the doctors went out and closed the door. Episode 79, The Confession. "Mom," Debbie said, looking at her mother's face. Tears filled her eyes. "Don't cry, Debbie," Carla smiled faintly. She wanted to wipe away Debbie's tears, but Debbie was holding her hand. "Mom, don't move." Debbie knew how weak her mother was. "How do you feel? Are you in pain?" Her heart felt like it was being shredded when she thought about how much pain her mother was enduring. Carla only shook her head slightly. "It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt at all. Alex, you'll take good care of Debbie, won't you?" Carla asked as her gaze slowly turned to Alex. Right from the beginning, she had seen the deep affection he had for Debbie. "Mom," Debbie said, understanding the meaning of her mother's words. "Yes, Mrs. Stonehill, I will take good care of Debbie," Alex said seriously as he looked into Carla's eyes. Good. Carla nodded her head in satisfaction. Her heart felt a little lighter. Alex was like family, and he would look after her daughter. "Debbie, there's something I need to tell you," Carla said, looking at her. Already her vision was growing a little dim. Debbie held her mother's hand tightly, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm not your biological mother," Carla said softly as she looked into Debbie's eyes. This was a secret that she had kept close to her heart for 20 years. Debbie was taken aback. "Mom?" she asked. "I had planned to keep this secret for the rest of my life," Carla said, tears gathering in her eyes. "But I felt that I was lying to you, and you should know the truth." No, Mom," Debbie mumbled in a daze. Carla was the only mother she had ever known, and now she was saying that she wasn't Debbie's biological mother. How could she accept that? Alex, who was standing to the side, was also surprised when he heard Carla's words. He looked at both women and realized that the two of them didn't resemble each other. "Silly child, you're as kind as your mother. That isn't good." When Carla looked at Debbie's sweet face, she saw Debbie's mother. Touched by the reminder, tears slid down her face. "No, Mom, you are my mother," Debbie insisted, growing anxious. "Sweet child, I'm not worthy to be your mother," Carla said gently. "Your mother is a dignified and elegant young lady, and I was just her young maid." Debbie shook her head slowly. When my young mistress gave birth to you, her family placed her under house arrest and she wasn't allowed to go out, Carla said. To prevent her from escaping, her family forced both of us to inject a poison. We could only survive if we kept consuming the antidote they gave us. Now the poison has flared up in me. The medicine only alleviates the illness for a while. This time it's too late. Mom, don't say any more, Debbie begged, but she had already begun to accept that Carla was not her mother. If I stop now, I'm afraid that I won't get the chance to say it later, Carla said gently. My mistress wanted to keep you safe and raise you herself, but then I learned that your family was looking for an opportunity to kill you while you were still a baby. Carla sighed. I told my mistress straight away. She was thoroughly disappointed with her family and had believed that if she stayed at home, she would wait for a chance to make a move against them. But when we heard of their plans, we took you, knocked out the guard, and ran out of the house. Debbie was hanging on to every word. We were very careful, Carla continued, but we were still discovered by the family. In the end, we were forced onto a cliff. They surrounded us, and my mistress wanted to go back with them and then find an opportunity to escape later. But the leader of the search party wanted to kill my mistress. She realized that something was wrong, but it was already too late, and they had their guns pointed right at us. Oh! Debbie couldn't help but exclaim softly. Alex's mouth also dropped open a little. The men were smiling, so sure of their victory, Carla said. But then my mistress suddenly hugged me, and we climbed down the cliff a little. I was so scared that I closed my eyes. Then through the whistling wind I heard her saying, Carla, take the child. I looked up and saw my mistress giving me a beautiful smile, and then she turned around and threw herself off the cliff. By the time I realized her intention, it was too late. Carla started to cry. I'm sorry, mistress. Debbie was dazed for a moment, as if she had also watched that miserable scene play out. Then Carla began to cough violently. Mom, put the oxygen mask back on, Debbie said, trying to put the mask on her. Let me finish, Carla insisted, turning her face away. She knew how sick she was. The mask wasn't going to make a difference. My poor young mistress, Carla sobbed. And there you were, still looking at me innocently, not understanding what had happened at all. I heard someone saying that they were coming down to search for us, so I didn't dare to stay there any longer. I carried you and left quickly. A few days later, Carla had carried Debbie into a small town in the northeast and started a new life. Mom. Debbie kept trying to put Carla's oxygen mask back on, but Carla wouldn't let her. Debbie, she said, take off the jade pendant I'm wearing. Debbie carefully removed the pendant from around Carla's neck. The green part of the pendant faded to crystal white, and there were a few strands of red mixed in at the end. It looked quite extraordinary. Carla had been wearing it for as long as Debbie could remember. She had always wondered how a poor family like hers could have such a nice-looking pendant. She had asked Carla, but she had never received an answer. This pendant belonged to my mistress, Carla said, her voice growing weaker. I think you should wear it. It belongs to you. Alex, Carla said, focusing on him with great effort. Yes, he said seriously. All these years Debbie has suffered just like me, Carla said, her voice growing feeble. She's too kind, just like her mother, and I worry that she'll be bullied. Since she's chosen you, I hope that you'll treat her well and protect her from being hurt again. Her eyelids were growing heavier and heavier, and she had to fight hard to keep them from closing. She had to hear Alex's answer. Okay, he said solemnly. I promise that, as long as I'm around, I won't let Debbie get hurt. No matter how much I'm injured, you can depend on me. Thank you, Carla said. I'm so relieved. A faint smile appeared on her face. She no longer had the strength to move, and her breathing slowed. Stop talking, Debbie said. Please put on the oxygen mask. She was afraid Carla would waste even more energy trying to speak. I really miss my mistress, Carla said softly as she slowly closed her eyes. I really miss her. You need to rest, Debbie said. She picked up the oxygen mask and pulled it toward Carla's face. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw Carla's hand slide down the bed. It lightly brushed Debbie and then stopped moving. Debbie looked at Carla, who had her eyes closed, and felt a great sense of emptiness in her heart. Mom? Mom? She asked, her lip trembling. She desperately hoped that Carla would respond like she always did, even just with a soft hum. But Carla just lay there quietly, motionless, her face devoid of life. Mom? She asked again, finally realizing what had happened, and a sorrowful wail escaped from her mouth. She hugged Carla's body and pressed her head against her chest, crying sorrowfully. The doctors from the nearby hospital finally arrived and were stopped at the door by Sam. They were no longer of any use. Debbie's mind flashed through scenes of her life with her mother. She didn't care about her biological mother. She only knew that Carla was the one who had known her and loved her the most. Carla was the woman she was the closest to, and now she was gone forever, leaving Debbie an orphan with nothing but memories. 5 minutes passed, then 10 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour. Debbie continued to cry. Her mother's smiling face and voice were gone, and Debbie couldn't control herself. Alex stood silently beside her, listening to her heartbreaking sobs. His heart felt torn in two, but he knew that no one could help her. She needed to grieve. Debbie, please don't cry, he thought. You won't be lonely, not with me here. No matter what the future holds, I'll stay with you forever. Episode 80, Looking for a Prince. Debbie cried for 3 whole hours that day. When she finally calmed down, Alex asked Sam to take care of Carla. Sam arranged for Carla's body to be cremated and her ashes placed in a grave in New York. Alex accompanied Debbie to the graveyard for the funeral, and when she saw Carla's grave, she cried for a long time. In the 5 days since Carla had passed away, Debbie had been really depressed. She didn't attend any classes at school, nor did she go to practice with the Dream Chasers. Alex was worried about her. If she didn't pull herself together soon, she would make herself ill. That morning he got up early, went out to buy some bread and milk, and then returned to the villa. A few days ago, Debbie had been refusing to eat at all. Then she began to eat a small amount at night. But now, to Alex's surprise, she ate a whole bowl of cereal and 2 slices of toast. Can you take me to band practice? She asked Alex after getting dressed properly for the first time in days. In the last few days, Debbie had been thinking a lot. She wondered what Carla would say if she could see her right now. She would feel hurt and blame herself for the state Debbie was in. She wouldn't want her to see her like this. Debbie's heart felt heavy, but she told herself that she needed to snap out of it as soon as possible. Carla needed to know that Debbie would have a good life. Only then would she be able to rest in peace. Okay, Alex agreed in surprise. If Debbie was able to accept the fact that Carla was gone, then she would begin to recover. They got a taxi to the door of the music company. The car park was filled with luxury cars, including a BMW and a Mercedes-Benz. Each car was worth at least $600,000. As Alex and Debbie arrived, a man and a woman got out of a Porsche. The man wore earrings and a thick chain around his neck. He seemed to be a hip-hop singer. The woman was Debbie's teammate, Melissa. Katie and Olivia had also arrived and walked over to Melissa. Is that Debbie's boyfriend? Olivia asked. What is he wearing? No wonder he's with Debbie. They have the same sense of style. Did they come by taxi? Katie asked. I'm not seeing things, am I? He's at least 20, so he must have a car, right? Didn't Debbie say that she came from a little town in the Northeast? Melissa asked. Some little place in the middle of nowhere? No doubt her tuition fees took all her mom's money. She can't possibly buy a car. I'm surprised she can afford the taxi. Melissa smiled proudly as she spoke with her friends. They looked at Debbie, who stood still, watching them with a cold expression. Alex wanted to go over there and beat them up, but he could guess what Debbie wanted. After all, they were in the same band, and she didn't want to make things worse. Besides, now that she had calmed down, he didn't want to upset her again. In any case, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future, so there was no need to do anything rash. Melissa and the others arrogantly walked through the main entrance. A Mercedes-Benz stopped at the side of the road, and a short-haired girl got out of the car. It was Rita, the girl he had previously met in the practice room. Rita saw Debbie and Alex, and she walked over to meet them. You came, Rita said, looking at Debbie with a hint of concern. Let's go in together. Debbie said goodbye to Alex and walked toward the door with her. Alex stood and watched. He had seen a trace of contempt in Rita's gaze when she looked at him. Combined with the way she looked at Debbie, it seemed that she didn't think him worthy of her. She looked down on him because she didn't think he could protect Debbie. He couldn't help but feel bitter. He took a taxi back to school. On the way, he thought about making some changes to help Debbie. At the very least, he should scare Melissa and the other girls a little, and let them know that he wasn't the loser they thought he was. He was much richer than their boyfriends. Although Alex was not the type of person who liked to brag, he would be willing to do so if it would protect Debbie. Didn't they just laugh at me for not having a car and ridicule Debbie for taking a taxi? He thought. Well, I'll make sure they see Debbie riding in a luxury car. But what kind of car? A month ago, Alex had ordered an extremely expensive Ferrari from the New York Auto Exhibition Center. He didn't know why the Ferrari he had ordered hadn't arrived yet. He should call and ask. Two beautiful young women were wandering around the campus of Preston University. One of them was Kelly Phillips, the girl who had been blocking Alex's way when he drove to the hospital to see Debbie's mother. That night, Kelly had been cornered by Henry, who wanted her to agree to a date. No matter what Kelly had said, Henry hadn't let her leave. She had been so angry, but she hadn't been able to do anything about it, and then an Audi had driven up. A young man had stepped out of the car and had hit the man who had rushed at him. Then, completely unafraid, he had faced down more than 10 people, jumped into the car, and sped toward them. Kelly thought that he would stop the car before he reached them, but he hadn't. He had increased his speed, knocking over the group of men, and continued on toward Henry. She had been scared when she had seen the car speeding toward her. She had covered her ears, closed her eyes, and screamed out loud. The car had knocked over Henry while she was standing right next to him, and she had been terrified. But then her nervousness and fear had been replaced by excitement. She had felt like a princess, and the man who had been driving the car had been her prince coming to her rescue. As she recalled his face, she felt extremely happy. From that day onward, she had begun searching for traces of the man within New York City. Eventually, she had discovered that he was probably a student at Preston University, so she had come here to search for him, but she still hadn't found him. Kelly, are you sure he's a student? Asked her friend Sharon Williams. How could one simple student have defeated so many people? It would take some nerve to drive into people like that. She was exhausted from Kelly dragging her around the city to look for this man. I had someone check it out for me, and I honestly think he might be a student at Preston University, Kelly said. But I don't know any more than that. Please, Sharon, come with me to find out more. She wasn't sure how to find her prince, but she was looking forward to meeting him. No, we've been walking for ages, and I'm tired, Sharon said. She spotted a supermarket. Look, let's go in there and buy some drinks, and then we can rest for a little while. Okay, Kelly agreed, and went into the supermarket with Sharon to buy 2 bottles of water. Then they walked to a nearby sports field as they sipped their drinks. They sat under the shade of a tree, having a rest. Hey, why haven't I heard anything about the Ferrari I ordered a month ago? Came a voice from nearby. Is there a problem? When Kelly heard the voice, her eyes lit up. A short distance away, Her prince was talking on the phone with his face angled slightly away from her. "What's taking so long?" he demanded. "I'll give you an extra $100,000 if you can deliver the car within 10 days. Can you do that?" He paused for a moment. "Okay, I'll transfer the money now, and I expect the car to be delivered as soon as possible." Kelly and Sharon slowly walked over to Alex. When Kelly saw his face, she was sure that he was the man who had been driving the car that night. She was elated. But now that Alex was on the phone, she didn't dare to disturb him. He seemed to be very masculine and impulsive, so she was afraid of offending him. She watched as he made another call. "Mr. Miller, please transfer $100,000 to the New York Auto Exhibition Center," he said into the phone. "Kelly, is that really the man who saved you that night?" Sharon whispered. "I think maybe there's something wrong with him." She looked him over. He was a university student who was dressed in ordinary clothes and didn't look at all rich. And yet he had just been casually discussing something about $100,000 and a Ferrari. What was wrong with him? "I'll help you meet him," Sharon said, rolling her eyes, and walked towards Alex. Alex ended the call. According to the car dealership, his custom-made Ferrari was being manufactured in Italy, and it would take at least 4 months for all the security tests to be carried out. He was giving them extra money to speed up the production, and he wanted the car delivered to him within 10 days. They had reluctantly agreed, and he'd had the bank transfer the $100,000 to them. Alex didn't care about the money at all, as long as he could get his Ferrari as quickly as possible. As he was about to leave, he noticed various students all sneering at him. Some of them even shook their heads and glanced at him with a smile when they passed by. They had heard what he had said on the phone and thought he was crazy. Alex shook his head and smiled lightly. They could think about what they liked. "Hello, Rolls-Royce. My custom-made Rolls-Royce, which costs $3 million, has not been delivered yet," the girl said, speaking into her phone. "What? 4 months? No, bring the car to me within 10 days. I'll add $100,000. I must have that car." Alex looked at her speechlessly. The girl was mocking him. He went to walk around her, but she was still blocking his path. When he moved to the left, she moved with him. When he moved to the right, she followed him again. Alex was very angry. He didn't even know this girl, so why was she teasing him? "Please step aside," Alex said, suppressing his anger. "Can't you see I'm on the phone?" The girl glared at Alex. He tried to walk around her again, but she continued to block his way and wouldn't let him pass. "Mr. Miller, transfer $100,000 to the Rolls-Royce company," Sharon said, continuing to mock him. She had only been teasing Alex to begin with, but then he had dared to glare at her. Now she didn't like him at all. Alex wasn't as amazing as Kelly had said he was. On the contrary, he was truly a loser. "Sharon, stop joking around," Kelly said, walking over with an embarrassed expression. After Alex's actions that night, Sharon was playing with fire. Of course, Kelly also didn't want her friend to tease the prince who had saved her.
Thank you for listening to Crown TV. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notification button.